Hello everyone, it's Dave Bretthauer. Thanks for stopping by with today's video. I'm going to be featuring a lot of outer space themes today, rocket ships, astronauts, and starry skies. So let's get started. I'm beginning with a plain piece of cardstock, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm sponging it with some fossilized amber Distress Oxide ink. I'm just using a sponge and slowly applying it to the paper in gentle circles. I've put the fossilized amber in the middle, and now I'm following up with worn lipstick. I'm going to put that more on the side and the top because I'm trying to build a scene here, and you'll see why later, but the positioning is sort of important. You want sort of a darker area towards the edge and a lighter area in the middle. I'm adding a third layer now, spiced marmalade, and I'm putting that over the fossilized amber and also over the worn lipstick, but leaving an open area in the middle that's a little bit lighter in color, more just made of that fossilized amber. Now I want to add a little bit of texture, so I'm going to spritz this with a bleach and water solution. It's 1 tablespoon of bleach to about 3 cups of water. You can adjust that, but this will give you a nice bright speckle. I'm going to be stamping it with an out-of-this-world stamp set from Memory Box. I'm going to be using different sentiments throughout this video, and for this one I've chosen Have a Blast. I embossed this with white embossing powder on a circle of black cardstock that I cut out with a circle die. Now I want to use the straight slider grooves from Memory Box to make my slider area. I'm going to be using the medium-sized groove here. And I'm also going to be using the starry ring. This will add a little bit of embellishment, a little bit of subtle cutout right around the Have a Blast circle. Now I'm going to put these dies on the piece so I can see how to position them. You'll see that I want to avoid the little circle of stars with that slider die, so I've angled it slightly so it doesn't quite hit it. You'll see why in a little bit. Now the next step, I'm going to be putting a rocket ship that slides up that slider piece, just like that. I've made sort of a mock-up mechanism here for you to check out. And I'll be using the Roaring Rocket from Memory Box to create that rocket piece. It comes with a little flame on the end and then all these little parts in the middle that you can cut out with different colors of cardstock. I assembled one here and put it together. You can see it's pretty fun, has some nice little details on it, some embossed areas, and I've just used foam mounting tape on the back to hold everything together. That doesn't need to be pretty. I'm just putting it on there so everything's secure. So the idea is this rocket will travel up and down the track of the slider here, slightly avoiding those stars and making room for that little sentiment in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to be using some foam mounting tape on the back to help me hold that slider in place. So I've trimmed off a piece of foam mounting tape and I'm cutting it in half and putting that on either side of that slider. Now you'll see that that foam mounting tape is going to go on top of those stars. So first I need to put something down to color those stars in from the back. So I'm going to put a piece of yellow cardstock over the stars. I'm just adding a little bit of glue and sticking it in place. And I'll trim that off along the edge so that it's not showing on the front. But now I can go ahead and put the extra piece of foam mounting tape to hold that other side of the slider. I'm going to be checking the middle. I need a little tab to be pulling up and down on so that that rocket ship moves. And I'll need to trim that just a little bit to fit inside my tracks. This just needs to be wide enough to fill in the space of the slider so you can't see through that slider opening. I've allowed a few minutes for the glue to dry on that yellow cardstock, so I can go ahead and trim that off. I'll just carefully trim it right along the edge so that you can't see any overhang from that yellow cardstock. And the yellow fills in all those little stars and provides just some subtle contrast to that background yellow and orange coloring that we have going on. Now the rocket ship needs to fit along the slider, so I'm just going to use a little bit more of that foam mounting tape to put a little piece on the back of the rocket ship to move up and down that slider opening. I'm going to make it right parallel to the opening, so I'm going to put it right in the center of the rocket ship, and I'll put enough on there so that it's good and secure. And what you'll end up with is a strip of foam mounting tape that's a second layer deeper, so that's going to fit down inside the groove of that slider. That's important because you'll need to get that attached to that little tab that you've made on the back that you'll be pulling up and down. So I'm just removing the liner there, and I have that rocket ship positioned inside so that that foam mounting tape is inside that slider track. I'll push it towards the bottom because that'll be the starting position for the slider. And then I'll go ahead and attach that long yellow tab, and that's what you'll be pulling up and down. So test it out. Once you've got it on, make sure that things are moving on there and that it's moving from top to bottom easily. So once you have that in place, it's just a matter of putting some foam mounting tape on the back so that everything's flat when you attach it to the card. So I've put a couple strips of narrow foam mounting tape on the back, and that'll be ready to be assembled to just my note card. I'll get that secure, and I'll go ahead and put my sentiment in that starry ring up above and make sure that my slider still works. Now I had one more die that I wanted to use. This is the Stitch Swirl Clouds, and I think it'll help complete that blast off look for the front of the card. I've cut out several clouds. I want you to see how nice the detail is on these. You get these nice little stitched swirls within the cloud. And I'm just going to put these on the card, overlapping and slightly hanging off the edge to create a nice blast off look for the rocket. I had so much fun making these, and I think I'll make a bunch to have on hand for birthday cards. Okay, on to the next card. For this next one, I wanted to create a moonscape. So I'm using my Distress Oxide ink in Iced Spruce. This is a great bluish gray ink, and it would be great for the area that's around the moon that this astronaut's going to be walking on. So I'm just swirling it on to some cardstock. This is plain white cardstock. I'm not paying too much attention to make it even because I'm going to be spraying this with some water and bleach solution just to give it a little bit of texture. And I've noticed that as these inks sit, they even out a little bit, so I'm not worried too much about how it looks right now. So I'll spray it on there, and you can see it gets all these nice little speckles on it, which is just perfect for moonscape. I'll use the stitched curves from Memory Box to create the cutout for this moon area. So I'm just picking the one that's going to work best. You could probably use any of them, but I've chosen this one that has sort of a big hill and a little hill, and I'm just cutting off the edge there. I've cut it so it's a little bit into the lighter area at the top that I didn't sponge as much on. That gives just a little bit of contrast there. And I'm going to be mounting it onto some dark gray cardstock, and that'll be the sky behind. Now I'm going to use the Twinkle Breeze die to make that sky a little bit more interesting. It's a long row of stars that sort of bends in a bit of a curve, and it's going to add a little bit of interest up there towards the top. I also want to choose my slider. So for this one, I want to choose a little bit of an arch. I want this astronaut to sort of jump back and forth with a little bit of an arched movement. You'll see why I've chosen this one in a second. It's pretty cute. So I've got those trimmed out, and you can see what it looks like. I've just put some color behind it so you can see the openings a little bit better. And I've left a little bit of room at the top for some words. So I'm going to use that same Out of This World stamp set again to put some text right in the upper right area above those stars. Using a little tape just to hold things in place while I use my Misty to get things stamped out. And I'm going to be stamping out Love You to the Moon and Back. So I've got it positioned. I'm going to ink it up with a little bit of Versamark ink. I'm going to stamp it, and then I'm going to emboss it with white embossing powder. Now I'm just going to add some on top. The sentiment has some fairly fine lines, so you might want to use some white detail embossing powder, but I used plain old white embossing powder here, and it still turned out just fine. Next, we're going to be using the Astro Suit. This is a little astronaut. He comes with different pieces, so you can kind of position him in ways that you want. I'm going to be using just a little bit of double stick tape to hold everything in place. And I've just cut out a piece of scrap cardstock as sort of the base for this guy. So I've put that double stick tape onto the scrap cardstock, and that's going to be sort of like a backing for that whole spacesuit. So I'm going to trim it down, and then I'm going to release the liner, and then I'm going to use that on the back. Now you want to get your helmet and the body of the suit in the right position. I have this with the back side of the die facing me. So just want to trim it down so that it fits. It depends on how you position these things, how big your backer piece is going to be. But I've got that in place. Now I've stuck it on, and that has secured the helmet to the body with still some sticky area showing. That's for the faceplate later on. The next spot you want to add some stickiness to is the arm. So I've just had little pieces left over with some double stick tape, and I'm positioning the arms so that they look like he's doing a cartwheel. You'll see why in just a second I'm doing this. But if you do it this way, then you'll find that you can do just about any interesting pose with this little astronaut suit. He's so much fun. Now I need to put the faceplate on there. This is the white die cut that comes with it. But I scrounged around inside my supply bin and I found some black shrink plastic. And I die cut that out, and that gives him a nice black faceplate, which looks really cool with this little astronaut suit. So now comes the fun part. We're going to be assembling him into that slider, and I want him to spin. So I've got everything cut out. Now it's just a matter of putting some foam mounting on the back of him so that he slides through that slider. I'm going to be using some round pop dots here. The round pop dots are what's going to make this guy spin as he goes along that slider. So I'm just sticking it kind of in the middle, I guess sort of towards the top of his neck there, and just get it nice and secure. And I'm going to pop that through that slider, and then on the back, I'll remove that liner and add a penny. That's going to add a little bit of weight, and it's going to make him spin as he goes back and forth along the slider. Now you can use different things, but a penny seems to always work. So I've stuck that on there, and I just need to make sure that that's nice and secure. Now he's going to go ahead and zoom back and forth here. Once you get the weight on it, it does make that little pop dot catch a bit. And you'll see as you hold it up in the air that he's going to be spinning. Now I want to make sure everything's positioned correctly. I want to make sure that those hills are going to be in the right spot so that he's jumping from hill to hill. And now it's just a matter of putting some more of that foam mounting tape on the back so that that penny doesn't get hung up on any of the card that we're going to be sticking this onto. Now, because of the thickness of that pop dot, plus the thickness of the penny, you do need to add 2 layers of foam mounting tape here. Otherwise, that mechanism might get stuck. So I'm putting 2 layers of foam mounting tape above and below the slider, and it's far enough so that the penny doesn't hit it, but close enough that it keeps things supported around the penny. I hope that makes sense. So once you get that all together, you'll just make sure that he slides back and forth, and then go ahead and enclose the rest of the card. I'm going to put a yellow strip of cardstock at the back. That's going to give a little bit of color inside those stars. I'm just going to use a little bit of adhesive, just a little bit of white glue here to put that yellow cardstock in place. And then you'll just follow that up with some foam mounting tape in 2 layers around the edge of the card so that when it's assembled, everything's nice and flat. Finally, make sure that those hills still fit. You want to make sure that those go on the front so that he has something to jump back and forth onto. Now I left a little space in the sky for a little bit more color, and I've decided to use the die Deep Space Planets to assemble something colorful in the upper left-hand corner of this card. So I've trimmed things out. This way, I wanted to just show you how easy it is to assemble these. I've just cut these out of different colors of cardstock, and I've used foam mounting tape just to hold everything in place on the back. I'll peel that off, and then I've trimmed out that ring, just like the ring of Saturn, in purple, and I'm going to slide that down over the planet to keep things in place. Now, this is going to give you just a nice little pop of color in the upper left-hand corner. You can make it any color you want, but I think it dresses it up a little bit. And I think if you wanted to go further, you could add some glitter glue or a little bit of Wink Stella pin to really make things shimmer and shine. Okay, this is the part where you're really going to get some inky fingers. So we're going to start by making a background. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of cardstock, and I'm swirling some color on there. This is different shades of Distress Oxide ink that I'm going to be using. So I started with Broken China. Now I'm adding some Faded Jeans. I want to give sort of a blended look, so I'm doing lots of different layers of color here, and I'm always trying to use circular strokes to add it on. I want to do it circular stroke because that makes things get applied in a more even way than just sort of a back and forth sort of stroke. But don't worry too much about it. As you add these over and over each other, it's going to start to blend more and get more and more smooth. So I'm adding just a little bit at a time because I'm not sure how much of that first ink I want to cover up with the second ink. So I'm just adding a little bit and trying to be conservative with it. I'm switching to Distress Oxide ink and Wilted Violet now. Now I'm just putting that here and there as little accents. I don't want it to get too purple. My idea here is that I want to create a night sky. So I want some color in it, but I also want it to be pretty dark. So I've switched to Black Soot here, and I'm putting that over different areas of color. I don't want to completely block out the color below, so I haven't completely filled it in with Black Soot. And then I'm going to go back and add a little bit more of the Faded Jeans. So this is sort of a back and forth artistic sort of approach. You're going to have a completely different look when you do yours, and that's what's so fun about it. Your fingers will get pretty inky, but I think that's one of my favorite parts. So any spot where it's a little bit too bright, I'm going to mute out with a little bit of the dark color. And then I'm going to spritz it with some of that bleach and water solution. And you can see how that really lights things up, provides a lot of texture, and the idea that there's some stars or some nebula in the background. And I'll grab my straight slider grooves. This is just going to be used for the slider down below. A little bit different twist on it this time. We're going to be using the slider in a way that reveals something. And I'm going to be dressing up the sky similarly to what we did in the second project, but for this one, a slightly different look. This is the starry sky border, and I'm just going to be putting that in the upper area, but I'm going to use the cutouts to make the stars in the background this time. This time, it's going to be a little bit more dimensional, and I'm going to put a saying inside the slider area. Now, since I've already shown you a couple other slider cards and how to assemble them, I skipped ahead on this one and went ahead and got everything together. So I've left an opening in the side so you can see that this little tab is going to go in and reveal the statement as you pull it in and out. And we need a little rocket ship on that tab to make things happen. So I've got this little rocket ship die, and I've assembled it. Same idea again. I've just used some foam mounting tape to hold everything in place, and I'm going to stick that right onto the slider tab so that it will move as the slider is moving. Now remember that I have to use a little piece of foam mounting tape on the back of that rocket ship to attach it to that slider tab. So I'm cutting a narrow piece, one that's just wide enough that it'll fit inside that slider groove. And I'll turn that around and get it to fit right in the middle. I want to be careful that that foam mounting tape doesn't get stuck to the side of those slider openings. I just want it to touch the tab. And I'm going to put it at the very end because it's going to be starting on the right-hand side of the card so that when you pull the tab, it goes along with it and reveals the sentiment underneath. Now, before I sign off for today, I just want to share a nice little embellishment tip at the end. I wanted the stars to shine a little bit more and add a little bit more texture to the card. So I took a white gel pen and added a few more dots and stars to the background. I hope you enjoyed the projects today. Thanks for stopping by.